My suitcase landed in the snow before I did. My mother closed the front door without looking back. I was still trying to understand why my own family had thrown me out when a black SUV slowly stopped in front of the house. Nobody there recognized the person who stepped out. My name is Abina Mensa. I'm 30 years old, and I work as a neonatal nurse in Kumasi. After my father passed away, I stayed home longer than I planned to help my mother keep the family together. I paid bills when money was tight, skipped promotions that required moving away, and believed sacrifice would eventually be appreciated. For days before Christmas, I learned how wrong I had been. I came home just before sunset after working a long double shift at the hospital. My feet were tired, my back hurt, and all I could think about was going inside, making a cup of tea, and finishing the Christmas gifts I had hidden in my room. Christmas was only 4 days away, and even though life had been difficult since my father passed away, I still wanted our home to feel warm and happy. As I walked toward the gate, I suddenly stopped. My heart sank. Every single thing I owned was outside. My clothes, books, family photos, blankets, and small Christmas presents were packed into old suitcases and cardboard boxes. They were sitting on the front lawn in the cold, as if they belonged to a stranger instead of someone who had lived there for years. For a few seconds, I could not move. I looked at the house, hoping someone would tell me it was all a mistake. Then I saw my younger brother, Musa, standing quietly beside our mother. He avoided looking into my eyes. His pregnant wife stood behind him near the front door, holding her hands together without saying a word. I slowly walked closer, trying to understand what was happening. "Mama," I asked softly, "why are my things outside?" My mother looked at me with a calm face that showed no sadness at all. She folded her arms and said, "Musa, his wife, and the baby need your room now. They need the space more than you do." I stared at her, waiting for her to smile or explain that this was only temporary. She never did. My voice began to shake. "Then, where am I supposed to go?" I asked. She looked at me for only a moment before answering, "You'll figure something out. You always do." Those words hurt more than seeing my suitcases outside. For years I had helped pay bills, bought groceries when money was short, and stayed in this house to support my family after my father died. I believed all those sacrifices meant something. But at that moment, it felt like none of them mattered. I bent down, picked up one of my heavy suitcases, and tried to stop myself from crying. I had no plan, no place to stay, and no idea what I would do next. Just then, the quiet street was interrupted by the slow sound of a vehicle. A shiny black SUV turned into our driveway and stopped right in front of the house. Everyone looked at it in surprise. The driver stepped out, looked directly at me, and asked, "Are you Abina Mensa?" The driver opened the back door, and a well-dressed woman stepped out of the black SUV. She looked calm and confident. She was wearing a simple dark suit and carrying a brown leather document case in one hand. She did not look surprised by the suitcases on the lawn or by the tension in front of the house. She looked straight at me as if I was the only person she had come to see. My mother quickly walked forward with a forced smile, and Musa stood a little taller, trying to understand who she was. The woman did not greet anyone else. She came directly to me and stopped only a few steps away. She looked into my eyes and said politely, "Are you Abina Mensa?" I nodded slowly, still confused. She gave a small smile and said, "I've been trying to reach you for the past 2 weeks." My mind raced. I had no idea who she was or why she had been looking for me. Before I could ask anything, my mother interrupted with confidence. "Is this about her job at the hospital?" she asked. "Has something happened?" Musa also spoke quickly. "She works very hard. If this is about work, we can all talk together." The woman turned to them with a respectful smile, but she gently shook her head. "No," she replied. "I'm not here from the hospital." That answer made everyone even more curious. My mother looked confused, and Musa exchanged a worried look with his wife. Nobody knew what to say next. The woman turned back to me and spoke in a calm voice. "Ms. Mensa, may we speak somewhere private?" she asked. Her question surprised me. I had expected her to explain why she was there, but instead she wanted a private conversation. I looked at my family, then back at her, wondering what could be so important. Before I could answer, my mother stepped forward again. "There is no need for that," she said quickly. "Come inside. We are family. Whatever you have to say can be said in front of all of us." She opened the front door as if the decision had already been made. The woman remained polite, but she did not move. She smiled gently and said, "Thank you for your kindness, but I'm afraid I can't do that." She closed her document case carefully and continued, "This conversation is meant only for Ms. Abina Mensa. It is private, and I must respect that." My mother's smile slowly disappeared. The silence became heavy as everyone stared at the stranger, wondering what secret had brought her to our home on the very day I had been thrown out. The woman waited until everyone became quiet. Then she looked at me and smiled kindly. "My name is Grace Owusu," she said. "I am the administrator of a community housing trust that has been helping working families for many years." I had never heard the name before, and I was sure my family had not either. I looked at her with confusion. "I'm sorry," I said. "I think you have the wrong person." She gently shook her head. "No, Ms. Abina Mensa. I am here because of your late father." The moment she mentioned my father, my heart became heavy. I missed him every single day. He had always been a quiet man who helped people without expecting praise. Even after he passed away, I often wondered if there were things about his life that I had never known. Grace opened her leather case and carefully took out a thick sealed folder with my name written on the front. She held it toward me with both hands. "Several months before your father passed away," she explained, "he completed important paperwork with our trust. In those documents, he named you as the person he believed should continue the work he had quietly supported for many years." I stared at her in complete surprise. "Me?" I asked. "There must be some mistake. My father never told me anything about this." Grace nodded gently. "He wanted to tell you himself, but he became ill before everything was completed. After his passing, the board continued reviewing his application. It has only recently been approved." I slowly accepted the sealed folder. My hands were shaking as I looked at my own name written across the front. I had expected bad news or some forgotten debt. I never imagined it would be something connected to my father. Behind me, I could feel my family's eyes fixed on the folder. My mother leaned forward slightly. Musa looked excited, almost as if he expected me to pull out a large check or legal papers giving me money. I carefully opened the folder and looked through the documents one by one. There were official letters, signed agreements, and detailed plans, but there was no money inside. Instead, the papers explained that my father had chosen me to oversee a housing project created to help hardworking families find safe and affordable homes. It was not a gift. It was not an inheritance. It was a great responsibility. I looked up slowly, still trying to understand everything I was reading. My family's hopeful expressions quickly changed into disappointment. They had expected wealth, but all they saw were documents. Then Grace looked at all of us and quietly said, "There is one more important detail you still need to know, : Grace waited until I finished reading the first few pages before she spoke again. Everyone around us was completely silent. Even Musa, who usually had something to say, stood quietly beside my mother. Grace pointed to another document inside the folder and said, "There is something else you need to understand before you make any decision." I turned the page carefully. It explained that the Community Housing Trust owned several residential properties built for hardworking families who could not afford expensive homes. The trust had recently completed the sale of one housing development, and the money from that sale had been safely placed into a special fund. I looked up at Grace, still unsure why she was telling me all of this. She smiled kindly and continued, "Your father left very clear instructions. This fund can only be used if you accept the leadership role he prepared for you. If you decide not to accept it, the board will simply choose another qualified person, and the project will continue without you." My family immediately became interested again. A few moments earlier, they had looked disappointed because there was no check inside the folder. Now they heard the words sale and fund, and their expressions quickly changed. Musa took a small step closer, trying to read the papers from where he stood. My mother looked at Grace with growing curiosity. I looked back at the documents. They were filled with plans, budgets, meeting notes, and legal agreements. There were pages showing future housing projects and families who were waiting for safe places to live. It became clear that this was never about making one person rich. It was about helping many people build better lives. I slowly shook my head. "I don't understand," I whispered. "My father never told me he worked with this organization." Grace nodded. "He rarely spoke about it," she replied. "For many years, he quietly gave his time to this trust. He attended meetings, helped raise support, visited building sites, and worked with other volunteers. He believed that helping families find safe homes was one of the most important things he could do. Her words left me speechless. I had lived with my father for years, yet I had never known this part of his life. My mother also looked shocked. She stared at the papers as if she were seeing a completely different man from the husband she thought she knew. Even Musa looked confused. As I carefully turned another page, my mother's face suddenly changed. She quickly stepped forward and pointed at the bottom of one document with trembling fingers. "Wait," she said quietly. "I know that signature." Everyone looked down at the page as she continued staring at the name, her eyes growing wider with every passing second. My mother kept staring at the signature at the bottom of the document. Her face slowly lost its color. "I know this name," she said quietly. "This is Kofi Bidiako. He was your father's closest friend for many years." I looked down at the page again. I remembered Uncle Kofi visiting our house when I was younger. After my father became sick, I had not seen him very often. I never imagined he was connected to all of this. Grace nodded. "Yes," she replied. "Mr. Kofi Bidiako witnessed every one of these documents when your father signed them several years ago. He made sure everything was completed correctly." Just as she finished speaking, another car slowly stopped near the house. An older man stepped out and walked toward us with a gentle smile. The moment I saw him, I recognized him immediately. "Uncle Kofi?" I said in surprise. He smiled warmly and shook my hand. "It's good to see you again, Nabina," he said. "I wish we were meeting under happier circumstances." He looked at the suitcases on the lawn, then at my family. His smile slowly disappeared. It was clear he understood what had happened without anyone saying a word. He turned to me and spoke calmly. "Your father talked about you many times during our meetings. He wanted me to help explain why he made this decision." I listened carefully. My heart was beating faster with every word. "He did not choose you because you were the oldest child," Uncle Kofi said. "He chose you because of the kind of person you became. He watched you care for your patients at the hospital. He watched you stay home after his illness to help your mother. He saw you pay bills without asking for praise. He saw you give your time, your money, and your strength to other people without expecting anything in return." Tears filled my eyes. I had never known my father noticed so much. I always believed my quiet sacrifices had gone unseen. Uncle Kofi looked at my mother, and then at Musa. "Your father also saw the struggles inside this family," he continued gently. "He understood far more than anyone realized. He believed Abina would protect this trust with honesty because she had already spent years putting other people before herself." For the first time since I arrived home, Musa could not meet anyone's eyes. He looked down at the ground and shifted nervously. His confident expression disappeared. In that moment, I realized he understood something painful. Our father had known exactly what had been happening inside our home long before he passed away, and his final decision reflected everything he had quietly seen. Only a few hours had passed since my mother told me to leave the house, but everything had suddenly changed. The same people who had watched my suitcases sit on the front lawn without saying a word were now acting as if nothing had happened. Musa cleared his throat and looked at me with a smile that did not feel real. "Abina," he said, "maybe we should forget everything that happened today. We are family. Christmas is only a few days away. Let's work things out and celebrate together." I looked at him in silence. His words sounded kind, but his actions from earlier that day were still fresh in my mind. He had stood beside our mother while I was thrown out of the house. He had not defended me. He had not even asked where I would sleep that night. Now, after hearing about my father's trust and the leadership role, he suddenly wanted peace. Something about it did not feel honest. My mother also tried to speak more gently than before. "Maybe we were too quick," she said quietly. "You know, families sometimes make mistakes. We should not let one bad day ruin Christmas." I wanted to believe her, but I could not forget how easily she had told me, "You'll figure something out." Those words still echoed in my heart. I thanked Grace and Uncle Kofi for everything they had explained. Then I picked up my suitcase again. "I need some time to think," I said politely. "Right now, I can't pretend nothing happened." Without waiting for anyone to answer, I left with my bags and checked into a small guest house for the night. Later that evening, my phone began ringing again and again. Some relatives were calling to ask strange questions. One aunt asked, "Is it true you're going to help Musa with the new project?" Another cousin asked if the whole family would benefit from my new position. I became confused. I had never promised anyone anything. As I spoke to more relatives, I slowly discovered what had happened. Only a short time after I left the house, Musa had already started telling family members that I would probably share whatever opportunities came with my new leadership role. He spoke as if my future had already become a family business. He wanted everyone to believe that good things were about to come to all of us because of me. I sat quietly on the edge of my bed and thought about everything. Musa had never asked what the job actually involved. He had never asked how much responsibility it carried or how many families depended on the trust. All he seemed to care about was what he believed could come from it. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself. My father had trusted me with something important. I would honor that trust with wisdom and honesty. My future was no longer something other people could claim simply because we shared the same family name, : A few days later, after thinking carefully about everything my father had planned, I made my decision. I called Grace and told her that I was ready to accept the leadership role at the Community Housing Trust. She sounded happy and thanked me for trusting my father's vision. She reminded me that the work would not be easy. It would require patience, honesty, and many difficult decisions. I smiled and said, if my father believed I could do it, then I will do my best. Christmas morning arrived, but I did not return to my mother's house. Even though they had invited me again, I knew my heart was not ready. I stayed at the small guest house where I had been sleeping since I left home. It was simple but peaceful. The owner decorated the dining room with a small Christmas tree, colorful lights, and handmade decorations. It was not the Christmas I had imagined, but for the first time in many days, I felt calm. Around lunchtime, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see two of my aunts and one of my older cousins standing outside. A few minutes later, more relatives arrived. I wondered if they had come because they wanted to ask about the trust or the housing project. I worried they might expect money or special favors, but I was wrong. One of my aunts looked at me with tears in her eyes. Abina, she said softly, we came because we recently learned the truth. I looked at her without speaking. She continued, we had no idea that after your father passed away, you were the one paying many of the household bills. We didn't know you bought groceries, helped with electricity, and covered expenses whenever your mother struggled. Another relative nodded with shame. We always believed Musa was taking care of the family, he admitted. That is what we were told. We never knew it was you. I lowered my eyes. I had never spoken about those things because I believed helping family should be done with love, not for praise. I never wanted anyone to thank me or feel sorry for me. My oldest aunt gently held my hand. We judged you unfairly, she said. When we heard you had left the house, we thought you had caused trouble. Now we understand you stayed for years because you were carrying responsibilities that no one else could see. Their words touched my heart more than I expected. For the first time since my father died, I felt that someone truly understood what those years had been like. We shared a simple Christmas meal together at the guest house. There were no expensive gifts or big celebrations, only honest conversations and warm smiles. The truth had finally reached the family, and it changed everything. People were no longer looking at me with doubt. They were finally seeing the person I had quietly been all along. A few days after Christmas, I was sitting outside the guest house with a warm cup of tea when I saw a familiar face walking slowly toward me. It was my mother. She was alone. Musa was not with her, and neither was anyone else from the family. She looked different from the last time I had seen her. Her shoulders were low, and her face looked tired. She stopped a few steps away from me and gave a small smile that quickly disappeared. Can we talk? She asked quietly. I nodded and invited her to sit beside me. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. I thought she had come to ask about the Community Housing Trust or the leadership position. I expected questions about the project, the documents, or the money connected to the property sale. But she never mentioned any of those things. Instead, she looked down at her hands and took a deep breath. Then she asked a question I never expected to hear. Abina, she said softly, why didn't you ever tell me how much you were carrying? I looked at her in silence. I knew exactly what she meant. She was talking about all the years after my father died. The late nights at the hospital. The extra shifts. The bills I quietly paid. The groceries I bought without telling anyone. The sacrifices I made so the family could stay together. I answered her as honestly as I could. Because I thought helping family wasn't something that needed announcing, I said. I never wanted anyone to praise me. I believed that if our family needed help, I should simply do what I could. My mother closed her eyes for a moment. Tears slowly filled them. I didn't see it, she whispered. I thought you were managing because you were strong. I never realized how much you were giving up. I smiled sadly. I wasn't trying to hide it, I replied. I just didn't want love to become something people counted or compared. She wiped her eyes and looked at me. For the first time in a very long time, I saw regret on her face. She wanted to say more, but no words came out. We sat there together without speaking. The silence between us felt different now. It was not filled with anger or blame. It was filled with memories, painful truths, and the weight of everything that had never been said. Sometimes there are no perfect words to repair a broken relationship. Sometimes the first step is simply being willing to face the truth together. Several months passed, and my life slowly began to change. Every day brought new responsibilities at the Community Housing Trust. There were meetings to attend, families to interview, building plans to review, and many important decisions to make. The work was not easy, but every time I felt tired, I remembered my father's faith in me. His trust gave me the strength to keep going. I wanted to honor the promise he had quietly made before he left this world. Finally, the day arrived when our first housing project under my leadership was completed. Families from different backgrounds gathered outside the new homes. Many of them had spent years living in small, crowded places or paying rent they could hardly afford. Some parents held their children's hands tightly while others could not stop smiling. The excitement on their faces was something I would never forget. One by one, each family received the keys to their new home. I watched a little girl run through her front door with laughter. A young couple stood quietly in their living room, unable to believe the house now belonged to them. An elderly woman wiped tears from her eyes as she thanked everyone who had helped make this day possible. As I watched those happy moments, I realized something my father had understood long before I did. A house is made with walls, doors, and windows, but a home is built with love, safety, kindness, and respect. You can live inside a beautiful house and still feel lonely. You can also have very little and still feel completely at home with the right people. That lesson stayed in my heart. During those same months, I heard that Musa was trying to repair the relationships he had damaged. Some relatives told me he had started helping our mother more often. Others said he had become quieter and more thoughtful than before. He no longer expected people to solve his problems. Instead, he was slowly learning to take responsibility for his own actions. He apologized to a few family members for the way he had behaved. I knew those apologies could not erase the past. Some wounds take a long time to heal, and some opportunities never return once they are lost. Still, I also understood that real change is not proven by beautiful words. It is shown through honest actions repeated over time. Whether Musa truly changed would not depend on what he promised. It would depend on the life he chose to live from that day forward. And for me, I had finally found a place where I truly felt at home. Months after everything happened, I often found myself thinking about that cold afternoon just before Christmas. I could still picture my old suitcases sitting on the front lawn and my mother closing the front door without looking back. At the time, I believed my life was falling apart. I thought I had lost my family, my home, and the place where I belonged. I could never have imagined that the hardest day of my life would also become the beginning of something better. Many people later asked me about the black SUV that arrived in our driveway. They spoke about it as if it had been the moment that changed everything. But whenever I thought about that day, I realized something important. The black SUV did not rescue me. It did not magically fix my pain or erase the hurt of being rejected by the people I loved most. The truth was much deeper than that. The black SUV simply arrived on the same day I finally stopped believing that my value depended on whether my family accepted me. For years, I had worked hard to earn their love. I stayed close to home after my father passed away. I worked extra shifts at the hospital. I paid bills without complaining. I quietly carried responsibilities that no one else wanted to carry. Deep inside, I hoped that one day someone would notice and say, "Abina, we are proud of you." That day never came. Instead, I was asked to leave my own home. At first, it felt like I had lost everything. I stood there with nothing but a few old suitcases, wondering where I would sleep and what my future would look like. I thought the closed door behind me meant my story was over. But I was wrong. That closed door pushed me toward a new life I never would have chosen for myself. It led me to my father's final gift, not of money, but of purpose. It taught me that my worth could never be decided by the opinions of people who failed to see my sacrifices. It showed me that real confidence comes from knowing who you are, even when others refuse to recognize it. Looking back now, I no longer remember that day as the day I was thrown out of my home. I remember it as the day I stopped waiting for someone else's approval before believing in myself. It was the first day I began building a future with my own choices, my own strength, and my own purpose, a life that no one else could take away or decide for me. Sometimes the door that closes in your face isn't the end of your story. It's the moment you finally discover which doors were waiting for you all along. Speed balloon, if your family asked you to leave just days before Christmas, would you ever go back, or would you choose a new beginning? Before you go, tell me honestly. If your own family put your suitcases outside just 4 days before Christmas, would you ever forgive them, or would you walk away and never look back? Share your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today. Remember, your worth is never decided by the people who fail to see your value.